Hello everyone, I'm Lizzie Sagoo, a soil scientist at ADAS, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to this webinar to demonstrate the new Defra nutrient management planning tool developed by Defra, ADAS and RSK Business Solutions. I'm joined today by my colleagues Izzy Lloyd and Anne Bogel, also soil scientists at ADAS, and Mark Brown from RSK Business Solutions, who has led the web-based development of the new tool. So we're just going to turn our cameras off now so you can see the screen a bit bigger. So before we launch into the webinar, just some basic housekeeping. So all your microphones have been muted. You can submit questions during the webinar using the question box, and please do this. We'll be answering questions at the end of the presentations, and Anne and Mark will be monitoring these throughout the webinar. Today's webinar has also been awarded 4 basis points, and we will put a link to a form for you to register your details for basis points in the chat now. We'll also be sharing a survey following the webinar. Finally, please be aware that we are recording today's presentation. So I'm going to start with a bit of background on nutrient management planning, and then we'll move to a live demonstration of the tool. So nutrient management planning, I'm sure you're all familiar with it. It's fundamental to economic and environmentally sustainable farming systems by helping farmers match inputs of nutrients in both fertiliser and organic materials to crop demand, which minimises losses to the environment. So applying the right amount of fertiliser makes both economic and environmental sense. It's important also to remember that nutrient management planning is required under legislation. So the Nitrate Vulnerable Zone rules in England and Scotland require farmers in an NVZ to plan their nitrogen use. And the farming rules for water require all farmers in England to have a nutrient management plan. And similarly, the control of pollution regulations, agricultural pollution regulations in Wales require all farms in Wales to have a nutrient management plan. Despite this, we know that not all farms have a nutrient management plan, and that there is scope for us to improve nutrient management planning on farms. In England, the Farm Practice Survey asked questions of farmers on their nutrient management planning. And the survey found in 2024 that 57% of farms had a nutrient management plan. And if you look back, this figure has remained largely unchanged in recent years, and at a similar level to that seen in 2011 when the question on nutrient management planning was first asked. So it is important that we do provide tools and support to farmers to help them with their nutrient management planning. So the ADAS Nutrient Management Guide, or RB209, is the key reference for all our guidance on nutrient management planning in England and Wales. So ADAS published this as 7 sections, which you can see on screen here. So section 1 provides guidance on the principles of nutrient management. Section 2 provides guidance on managing organic materials, and the other sections provide guidance on specific crop groups. The information published in these guides is the result of many years' worth of research, and it's our best guidance to farmers and advisors on nutrient management. The HDB Nutrient Management Guide, it's written guidance, so it's available as PDF documents online and also as hard copy. But to further support farmers with their nutrient management planning, Defra have released a new nutrient management planning tool on .gov. The tool provides nutrient recommendations based on the based on the guidance in the ADAS Nutrient Management Guide. And the tool is a replacement for the previous Planner and Manner desk-based software tools that I'm sure many of you online today will be familiar with. So the beta version of the tool was released last month. It provides field-level record keeping and nutrient management planning, and it helps assess compliance against the relevant legislation. So NVZs and farming rules for water in England, and the control of agricultural pollution regulations in Wales. The tool was developed by Defra, ADAS and RSK Business Solutions with support from ADAS. It's free to use and available to anyone in the UK via .gov. You can access the tool via the QR code on screen, and we'll also put a link in it in the chat at the end of the webinar. Or you can find it by Googling Defra Nutrient Management Planning Tool. Sign in is using a .gov government gateway ID or one login. If you've got an existing government gateway ID, you can use that to sign in. Alternatively, you can create a new government gateway ID or one login. And as you go into the tool and you go to start using it, when you go to log in, there is guidance on the pages on how to set those up. So the current version available on .gov is a beta version, and future releases will include some additional functionality as that's available. So we have an additional release planned later this month, which will add a feature to help users calculate their existing manure storage capacity. Later, we will also add what we're calling a quick access MANA NPK calculations. So MANA, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's a software tool which estimates the crop available nutrient supply from organic materials. The MANA calculations are integrated into the main nutrient management planning tool. So if you're in the main nutrient management planning tool and you plan an application of organic material to one of your fields, the estimates that you'll get from the crop available nutrient supply have come from MANA. That the quick access MANA will allow users to access the MANA calculations without having to go through the full crop nutrient management planning process in the main part of the tool. So the current beta release is applicable in England and Wales, and later this year we will provide a release which provides the Scottish recommendations and NVZ compliance in Scotland as well. There will be a feature to calculate the amount of manure produced on farm and to calculate the minimum regulatory storage requirements for slurry and poultry manure. We're also going to add functionality to allow existing Planet users the ability to import their data from Planet into the new tool. And then a release later in 2027 will also add some nutrient balance calculations. So that gives you an overview of what we're planning to add to the tool in the future. And as you log into the tool, there is a release schedule there, which details when these future releases will be coming. So we're now going to move to a live demonstration of the tool. Okay, so what you can see on screen now is the homepage for the tool, which provides a bit of background about the tool and what it does and how it works. So if you scroll down through there, we click on Start Now. And what we're gonna do now is we're gonna run through a demonstration where we will show you the process of adding a farm and adding 3 fields to that farm. We're gonna add 2 arable and 1 grassland fields. We're gonna plan some fertiliser and manure use and view a fertiliser recommendation. So it'll give you a basic broad overview of the functionality of the tool. So we're going to start by adding a farm. So we're going to add a farm. We're going to call our farm today Poplar Farm. We then get asked which country is Poplar Farm in. So we have the option of England or Wales. A later option of Scotland will be added. So the fertiliser recommendations in England and Wales are the same. They both draw on the RB209 fertiliser recommendations. But the reason we've got this distinction here is that if you're in England, we will help assess compliance against the NVZ regulations, whereas if you're in Wales, it's the Control of Agricultural Pollution regulations. So we're going to select that our farm is in England. Because we select England, this next page just flags relevant legislation that farmers need to be aware of. So it flags the farming rules for water and the Nitrate Vulnerable Zone rules. So we're going to click Continue. We then get asked for the postcode. So we're going to say our postcode is SN77NL. And we're asked for the postcode because we use postcode to pull up average annual rainfall data for the farm. So if we select Continue there, it will, so first of all, we'll have to select our address from the list, and it pulls up our average annual rainfall. So this is 30-year long-term average annual rainfall, and for us here, ours is 656 millimetres. This average annual rainfall is used to get our soil nitrogen supply status, because we need our rainfall to estimate our SNS when planning our nitrogen use. If you had more accurate information for your farm, if you had a weather station set on your farm, you could change that data and enter your own average annual rainfall figure. But in this instance, we're going to accept that and continue. We're now asked a question about how many of our fields are in a nitrate vulnerable zone. And we get the option to say all of the fields are in NVZ, none of them are, or some of them are. And why this is because fields that are in an NVZ, we would, if you have a field in an NVZ and you enter an application of fertiliser or manure that would breach an NVZ rule, we'd flag a warning message to you. So we need to know whether the fields are in an NVZ or not. So in this farm, we're going to say all of our fields are in an NVZ. We're then asked a question on whether any of the fields are above 300 metres. And again, we have the option of saying all of them are, some of them are, or none of them are. And this is linked to grassland and grass growth class, because if any of the fields are above 300 metres and they have grass in them, that affects the grass growth class. So in this instance, we're going to say none of our fields are above 300 metres. We're then asked whether we're a registered organic producer, and this is linked to the NVZ warning messages where there's some small differences for organic producers. So we're going to select no here. And then we've added the information that we need to set up our farm. You get to see this check your answers page, which reflects back the information that you've just entered. And if you need to change any of it, you can change it there. But we're going to accept that and add this farm. So now we've got our farm entered. The next step is to add our fields. So we can select this link here to add our fields. So we're going to go through and add details for 3 different fields. Our first field is Chestnut Field. And we get asked our field dimension. So our field area is 4 hectares. Our cropped area is the same at 4 hectares. And our manure non-spreading area is 0.2 of a hectare. We're then asked what soil type we are. This list you can see on screen is the list of soil types that we have in RB209. So the soils on our farm are medium soil. So we'll select medium soil. We then get asked whether we want to add a soil analysis for Chestnut Field. So I'm sure all of you are familiar with the fact that under farming rules, water farmers should be getting regular soil analysis. So we hope that everybody would have a soil analysis, and we can. And in this field, we do have a soil analysis. So we'll select yes, we want to add a soil analysis. The first question we get answered here before we enter our details is whether we expect sulfur deficiency in the crops grown in this field. And this is because RB209 will provide us, so the tool will provide us with a sulfur recommendation for crops if they're grown in fields where we've said that we've recognised or expected sulfur deficiency. So yeah, we do think the crops grown on this farm are sulfur deficient, so we'll select yes. So we sampled the soils on our farm at the beginning of February, a couple of years ago, 2024. So we'll enter the date of soil analysis. And then we get the option about how we want to enter our soil analysis. So we can enter it either as an index or in milligrams per litre. So it's up to the farmer, depending what the lab report in front of them is giving them. But in this example, we're going to say that we want to enter it as an index. Okay, so the soil analysis that I'm looking at, we've got a pH of 6.2. We've got a phosphorus index of 2, a potash index of 2+, and a magnesium index of 3. So we'll enter those. Now, you next get asked what was the last harvest year. So you get asked this question when you first set up your field, and that's because we need to know what last year was, because then we're planning for the next year. And you'll know that we need to know what our last crop was in order to generate a fertiliser recommendation for our next crop. So our last harvest year for this field was 2025, and we're now planning our fertiliser use for 2026. So the next few questions are all gathering information on the previous crops. And again, we need to know information on previous crops, so the crop last year, and you also need to know whether the field was in grass any of the last 3 years. And that we need that information in order to determine the soil nitrogen supply index of the field. So you'll know that soil nitrogen supply is dependent on rainfall and previous cropping and soil type. So for this field, this is an arable field, so we haven't had this field in grass any of the last 3 years. So we'll select no, and now we enter the crop last year. So last year, this field was in winter beans, which is under the other arable crop group. That's winter beans. So then we get the check your answer screen back, showing us the information we've entered. So we can check that, and then we can add this field. So we've now entered all the details for chestnut field, and we can move on to add our second arable field. So we're going to enter this again. We don't want to copy details from an existing field. And this field is Broom Hill. And this field is 5.2 hectares in the same field and cropped area. And we're going to leave the manure non-spreading area blank, so that's optional. You don't have to enter it. So again, the soils in our farm are medium, so this is medium soil. And we've also got a soil analysis for this field. And similar to our previous field, we would expect sulfur deficiency. So we sampled the soil on our farm on the same date. So this was also sampled on the 2nd of February in 2024. But this time round, we'll show you entering the soil analysis as in milligrams per litre. So the soil analysis that I've got, we've got a pH of 6.4. Our phosphorus is 15 milligrams per litre. I think that's the top of index 1. Our potassium is 250 milligrams per litre, which would put us index 3, and magnesium is 82 milligrams per litre, which is index 2. And those index values will show back to you in the recommendations table, which you'll see a little bit later. So again, our last harvest year was 2025, and we're planning for 26. This field, we are going to say it's been in grass for the last three years. So this is a grass lay just coming back into arable. So yes, it has been in grass, and it was in grass in all of those years. Now, because we've selected that it was grass, we need to know a bit about how that grass was managed. So we're saying our management, so we cut and graze that field. We get asked whether it had a high clover content. This is to do with the nitrogen, whether it's a high or low end use, and we're going to say it didn't. So this is a pure grass sward, or it was a pure grass sward. And we get asked how much nitrogen in fertiliser and crop available nitrogen from organic manures was typically applied to the grass in that field. So in our field, we were typically applying between 100 and 250 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare. So we've got our check your answers back again there. You can see the information that we've entered, and we're going to select to add that field. So we've now added our 2 fields that are coming into arable production. And we're just going to enter one more field that we're going to plan as a grass field. So we're not copying an existing field. So our grassland field is called pasture field. It has a field area of 8.2 hectares, a cropped area of 8.2 hectares, and 0 hectares manure non-spread area. Soil in this field is also medium. We do have a soil analysis. We do expect sulfur deficiency. And again, it was sampled on the same day, 2nd of February, 2024. This time round, we'll enter the soil analysis as an index. We've got a pH of 6.3. We've got a P index of 1, a K index of 2-, and a magnesium index of 2. So the last harvest year was 2025. Now this is our permanent pasture field, so yes, it has been in grass. It was in grass all of those years. It was cut and grazed. It's a pure grass sward, so it didn't have a high clover content. And our typical end use is 100 to 250 kilograms per hectare. Okay, so we can see back the details for that field, and we can add that. So we've now entered our 3 fields for part of this demonstration. So we've got Broomhill and Chestnut field that we're now going to plan an arable crop in, and we've got pasture field that we're going to use to plan a grass crop. So we next need to go to this option for view, create, or update a nutrient management plan. And we want to start a plan for 2026. So what we're going to do is we're going to plan for a winter wheat crop in both of our arable fields. So we're going to plan for a cereal crop, and we're going to select winter wheat from the list. And then when you're adding a crop, you'll get the option of which fields you want to add it to. So this means that if you have multiple fields that are growing the same crop, you can add that all together. So for this example, we're going to put our wheat in Broomhill and Chestnut field. You can name that crop group, so we're going to call it winter wheat. And then you get the option of entering the variety name, which you don't, it's optional, we don't have to add it, but we'll add its variety Graham. You'll then ask the planting date, and you get the option to have the same date, enter the same date for all the fields, different dates for different fields, or you don't have to enter the planting date. You could select no, and you could always return to that later. But we're going to say that we had the same planting date for both of these fields. And we planted our wheat on the 28th of September last year, 2025. We're then asked what our expected yield is. So our expected yield for winter wheat, the sort of default typical yield that the RB209 recommendations is based on is 8 tonnes per hectare. If you had a different yield, that would affect the nutrient recommendations. So we ask information on yield. I am going to say here that we expect different yields in those fields because they're slightly different. We are going to say we're expecting 9 tonnes per hectare, so a bit higher than the typical in Broomhill, but we're expecting a more typical yield of 8 tonnes per hectare in Chestnut field. So we are planting feed wheat, and we are going to chop and incorporate the straw. So we've now entered all the details on the planned winter wheat crop in those fields, so we can select to create a plan. So if we scroll down, we can now see that we've added a crop group, winter wheat there, and you can see the 2 fields there. So before we go and view those recommendations, we're going to also add our grass field. So we'll select to add a crop group, and this time round we're going to select grass. And we've only got one other field available, and we're going to put grass in pasture field. So we can just call the crop group grass. So this is a permanent pasture field, so it's an existing sward. We then get asked about what type of sward it is. And again, this is linked to the recommendations, but this is a pure grass sward, so we select grass. And then we get asked a few questions about our grass management. So this field, we cut and graze it. So we're going to select grazing and silage. And the next question is, how many cuts and grazings will we have in this field? And this is all about collecting the information we need on the grass management. So we are going to have 3 cuts and grazings. And then we get given the options of the different management sequences. So we're planning to cut the field and then graze it twice. So we'll select silage, grazing, grazing. So now what you can see on the screen, so we reflect back to the user. So we've worked from the information that's been provided on rainfall and soil type. We've got our grass growth class. So you can see this field, we've got a grass growth class of average. Based on that grass growth class and the management sequence we've put in, we are reflecting back to the users what we think what's the likely range of typical total target dry matter yield to that field. So we've got to select here what our target dry matter yield is, and that is because the nitrogen recommendations from RB209 are based on target dry matter yield. But what we've done is we've given the user what we think based on the grass growth class that is a likely range of target dry matter yield to this field. So for us, we are planning, we're targeting 9 tonnes per hectare. So, and now we get our check, we've entered all the details we need for our grass field, we've checked our answers, and we add that. So now we've added our 3 fields. So we've got 2 winter wheat fields and 1 grassland field. So we're just going to show you now the recommendations. So we can come down here and click on update field or view recommendation to look at the recommendations for chestnut field. So the recommendation screen you've got here for the winter wheat and chestnut field, you can see that the soil index. We can see our SNS index, and we can see the soil indices that we entered for phosphate and potash and lime. The next column along that we've got is our total crop need. So that's the recommendation from RB209. Then we've got a couple of other columns. So the first column is our phosphate and potash balance. So the tool will calculate a rolling P and K balance and show the balance there. Because we have just set up this farm and we've just started, the balance is 0. But if we this year, say, applied an application of, say, 40 tonnes per hectare of cattle manure, which would apply more phosphate and potash that this particular crop needed, that would then appear as a positive balance in our next year's plan. So it's helping the farmers manage their P and K across a rotation. The next column along would show, if we've got a manure application on this field, it would show the nutrient supply for the manures. And then finally, you've got your fertiliser or lime recommendation, which is your crop need plus or minus your PK balance and taking into account the supply from the manures. And in our grassland field in a minute, we will show you adding a manure application. So that's our recommendations in the main table there. If we scroll down a little bit, what doesn't matter. You can then see there's some additional text guidance there, and that's sort of the additional text guidance taken from RB209. If we scroll back up to the top, we're just going to show you a couple of the other tabs. So if we move along, we've got a tab for organic and inorganic materials. So we can use this tab to add an application of manure or fertiliser to this one field. And then the final tab along to the right is our crop field and soil details. So this is displaying back to us our field details that we've entered and our crop details we've entered, and we could edit those details from this screen. So we're now going to go back to our 2026 plan. And what we're going to do is, if you go back to this high level plan, you then, when you add an application of either fertiliser or organic manures, you get the option to add it to more than one field. So we're going to select the inorganic fertiliser application tab here. We're just going to plan our nitrogen use for chestnut fields. So if you've noticed, the nitrogen recommendation for chestnut field was 190 kilograms per hectare. So we're just going to add our nitrogen applications to apply that. So if we go to add a fertiliser application, we want to apply that to our winter wheat fields. So that will apply it to both our winter wheat fields. The screen here, so there's a few places in the tool where we flag to the users where there's any restrictions on when they can apply materials. So we're showing back to the user here what our close period is for spreading nitrogen fertiliser for this field and crop. And then if we were adding an application of manures, high readily available end manures, we would also show back to them what the close spreading period for manures was for high RAM manures. So our first nitrogen, we're going to plan to put that on later in March, so 20th of March, 26. And our first nitrogen, we're going to apply a nitrogen sulfur product, which applies about 50 kilograms of nitrogen and 30 of sulfur. And then we can continue. And then add that to our plan. So that's added that, and we're just going to do that a couple more times just to add our additional nitrogen splits. So we'll again select to add our winter wheat fields, and then we're going to add another application in early April, the 10th of April, and we'll apply 70 of nitrogen to this split, to this application. And then we can add that to our plan. And then we'll add our final application as well. At the end of April, we're going to plan to add another 70 kilograms per hectare of nitrogen. So this is just demonstrating the process of adding a fertiliser application, and you can go through this for each of the fertiliser products that you're adding. So we've now entered our nitrogen plan for those two fields. So we can go back, if we go back to the crops and fields, and if we go back and look at chestnut field again, so you can see there we had a fertiliser recommendation of 190, and now in that far column, that's showing us how much we've put in our plan to apply as fertiliser. So we've planned fertiliser nitrogen applications of 190 kilograms per hectare, and we've got some 30 kilograms per hectare also of sulfur that's been applied. Okay, let's go back to our 2026 plan, and let's look at our grassland recommendations, so pasture field. If we have a look at those recommendations. So if you remember, we had 1 cut and 2 grazings in this field, and the recommendations display back. So for each of the we've got the first cut there, you can see, and then as we scroll down, we've got the recommendations for each of the grazings there. Okay, so for this field, we're just going to demonstrate adding an organic material. So we're going to add a cattle slurry application to pasture field. So cattle slurry, it's a livestock manure, and we'll select cattle slurry from the list. Then we get asked which cattle grazing is for. So we're going to apply this before first cut. So we'll say first one. And then you could see there, because this is cattle slurry, which is a high readily available nitrogen material, it's showing us what our close period is based on our soil and crop details. We are going to apply this cattle slurry at the end of February, so the 28th of February. And so we're asked how we're applying it, so the method of application. So we're going to apply this with a band spreader to short grass. So depending on the manure that you select, it will pull up the typical values of that manure type from RB209, and that's what we can see on screen here. And then we get the option of saying, yes, we want to use those typical figures, or if we had an analysis of the material that we were going to spread, we could select no, and we could enter analysis from our own manure type. But in this example, we're just going to use those typical figures. We're then asked to enter our application rate. So we get the option here to enter an application rate in cubic meters per hectare. Or if you know the area of the field and the quantity you're spreading, we could do it that way, or we can use a typical application rate of 30 cubes per hectare. But in this example, we're going to enter our own application rate. And we're going to plan 35 cubic meters per hectare. Now, what that's done there is that's just brought up an NVZ warning message, and that is flagging that that rate of 35 cubes per hectare is more, it exceeds the limit that we've got between the end of the close spreading period, end of the close spreading period and the end of the February. So the NVZ rules say that you can't apply more than 30 cubic meters per hectare of slurry or 8 tons per hectare of poultry manure between the end of the close spreading period and the end of February. So we flash a warning up to the user there, and then that gives them the opportunity to amend their plan. So it's just flagging, and we've got this throughout the tool. So if we'd have selected to have put that application on during the close spreading period, it would also have flashed up a warning message. So we've seen that warning message, so we're going to amend our plan. So we're going to spread 30 cubic meters per hectare. So we comply with the legislation. We're applying this to a grass field, so we're not going to incorporate it. The next screen, we get given the option to amend information on climatic conditions at the point of application. Now, those of you that are familiar with MANA will be familiar with these questions here. These are all linked to factors that affect the nitrogen losses from the application, so ammonia volatilization and nitrate leaching. So what we've displayed back to the user there is kind of typical figures. And if you click on that about these values, that does also give you a bit more information on what each one is. And if you wanted to change it, if you scroll down, you could change it by clicking on the change button there. But in this example, we are going to accept those typical figures and move on. So now we get a check your answers screen. We're going to scroll down and we will accept that and add that to the plan. So now we've added that manure application, we can see that appear in our plan. So we added this cattle slurry application for our first cut, and you can see there we've got the nutrient supply for the manures, you've got a value for crop available nitrogen, phosphate, potash and sulfur, and you can also see the column that shows our fertiliser and lime recommendation to the right of that has been amended down. So you can see we've got the total crop need minus the supply from the manures equals your fertiliser or lime recommendation. So that's the additional amount that we're recommending that you need to apply as inorganic nitrogen or inorganic fertiliser. Okay, so just wanted to show you, so the information that we've entered, you can see it on screen. You also have the option of producing that as a report. So if you use that option there, download, print or export this plan, we can select to view a crop or nutrient management report, and then we can select which fields that we want to view for. We're going to select all our fields there. And then we just get a report up that contains all the information that we had on screen, and we can save that as a PDF and print it as well. So you can see the report there. Okay, the final thing that we're just going to show you now is some of the NVZ compliance calculations. So if we go back to the farm's homepage, you can also see there that you're able to create an NVZ report. So at the moment, we can help farmers calculate compliance with the NMAX rules. So the rules that give maximum nitrogen limits that you can apply to certain crop types. And also we've got calculations to help farmers assess their compliance with the livestock manure farm limit. So that's the 170 limit. So we're going to show you the NMAX report. So we'd select to create a report, and then we want to create an NVZ report. And we're going to look at our NMAX report. So we click continue, and we're going to look at our NMAX report for 2026. So we've already entered quite a bit. So we've got a grass field and 2 winter wheat fields. These are both crops that have NMAX limits. And we've entered details of fertiliser and manure applications to those fields, which is the information we need to do an NMAX report. So we'll select both of those fields, and then you can see that we've calculated our compliance with NMAX. So at the top, we've got a summary that shows for both of the crops there, for grass and winter wheat, it says NMAX compliant, and the applications we've entered for both of those fields are compliant with NMAX. Now, if we scroll down, for our grass field, you can see there the structure of this report is the first for the first table. We've got the we've got the NMAX limit. So this shows that NMAX limit for grass before adjustments is 300 kilograms per hectare, and then we've got the limit for the grass field. So we've got the limit for the grass field there, and if we scroll down, we've got the amount of nitrogen that we put on. If we keep scrolling down, let's look at our winter wheat. So we had 2 winter wheat fields there, Broomhill and Chestnut Field. We've got the limit, NMAX limit for winter wheat is 220 kilograms per hectare. If you remember one of the fields, Broomhill, we had slightly higher yield, so we've got an adjustment there, an extra 20 kilograms per hectare. So we've got the adjusted NMAX limit, and for our winter wheat, the total amount, the maximum we can apply over those 2 fields, so those 2 fields of 5.2 and 4 hectares, is 2,128. And the next table below that calculates what we've actually applied. So based on our applications of fertiliser, 190 kilograms per hectare to both fields, we've applied 1,748, so within that NMAX limit. So that's just to show you the NMAX report. If we now scroll up and go back, so the final one that we've got at the moment in there is the livestock manure end farm limit report. So we're not going to go through and demonstrate that for you now, but if you went into that, that would guide you through the process of entering the information that you need in order to calculate compliance with the livestock manure end farm limit. So the 170 kilograms per hectare limit. So you'd be asked information about your farm area, asked to enter information about the livestock that you have on your farm, and any imports or exports of livestock manure. And that would then produce your report that would calculate what your nitrogen loading is across your farm. So that gives you an overview of the functionality that we've got within the tool. We are now going to stop sharing the screen, and we will, if anyone's got any questions, you might have already put them in the question box, but if anyone's got any questions, please add them to the question box. And I know Anne's been monitoring them. So
yes, thank you. We have lots of questions, Lizzie. You'll be pleased. I
thought we might have.
So I will endeavour to go through them, and so apologies if we don't get through them all, but we'll see how we go. So we had a lot of questions at the beginning about the ability to pre-populate fields using SPI or data within the RPA. Can you tell us about that, please, Lizzie?
Yeah. So at the moment, we can't import data into the tool. So our priority for importing data into the tool is the functionality to allow existing Planet users to import data from their Planet farm files. We are looking at what ability that we could add into the tool to import basic sort of farm name details, but yeah, so that's one to come, but we don't have that at the moment.
That's great, thank you. Another one is, what about herbal lays and other?
Great question.
crops?
We get that all the time. So you might have noticed that the sward types that were available when we went through the grassland field, we had grass only, grass clover, red clover or lucerne, and that reflects the guidance that we've got in RB209 at the moment. So the tool provides fertiliser recommendations and guidance on all the crop types that are in RB209, And at the moment, we don't have multi-species swards or herbal lays in RB209, so we don't cater for them within the tool. But I know we're in close contact with AHDB, and I know that's something that's been raised with them in terms of RB209, and they are looking at it. And if it was added to RB209, it would then be added into the tool. So it might be something that we can get in the future, which would be great.
Okay, another one. Can you explain what a crop year is? What does it run from? Does it run from 1st of Jan to 31st of December, 1st of October to, or something else?
I mean, so we talk about crop year or harvest year, and that's typically the year that we're going to harvest the crop in. So we would say now we're in harvest year 2026. So we might have had winter cereals planted at the end of 2025 that are for harvest year 2026, because they'll be harvested in 26. Or you might have spring cereals planted soon to be harvested this autumn, also in harvest year 2026. So it's really about when you plan to harvest your crops. And obviously we know we have longer and shorter season crops.
And on sort of the year question, there was a question about, I couldn't see where in the plan you could select the year. Can it only be for the current year that you plan, or can you plan for future years or previous years?
Yeah, so you can plan into future years once you've started building your plan as such. So we went in and we said our last harvest year was 2025, because we need to know what we did last year in order to start planning, and we planned 2026. So now we've done our 2026 plan. If we went back into that farm file, the option of creating a plan for 2027 would be there, because we'd created our 2026 plan, and the tool allows you to build year on year like that.
That's great. Another one, does the tool replace the need for a FACS qualified advisor? Is the plan compliant without being signed off by a FACS qualified advisor?
So the tool provides recommendations based on RB209. It doesn't necessarily replace the need for FACS qualified advisor. And if there are any requirements for a nutrient management plan to be signed off by a FACS qualified advisor, that would still be in place. It's something that in addition, and I'm sure that, well, I hope that a lot of FACS qualified advisors will be using the tool.
Jumping to manures, supply for manures, is it just the current year of application that the manna bit looks at, or can it look at the second year release?
Yeah, so the way manna works is for crop available nitrogen, we provide an estimate of nitrogen to the current crop in the current year, and then we provide an estimate of mineralization into the second year. So that comes from manna. And if we then were to build that plan into the second year, so our grassland field where we added that cattle slurry, we saw the nitrogen supply from the cattle slurry in this year 2027. If we then went in and had a plan for 2026, if we then created a plan for 2027, there would be a small nitrogen supply from the manure showing then. And importantly, we've then also with manures, we've got this PK balancing feature. So quite often we know with manures, we might be applying more P and K in a single application than that particular crop needs. And we calculate any surplus. So if you apply more than the crop needs, that surplus rolls to the following year and it's taken off your fertiliser recommendation for the next year. So it's helping farmers and advisors do their P and K balancing over a rotation.
A question about double cropping. Can it do double cropping, for example, grass to maize? And then also, how do you assign NVZs to each field? So
yeah, okay, so double cropping, yes, there are a number of double cropping scenarios allowed within the tool. They are the same ones as we had in Planet. So what you'd be able to do if it was a double cropping scenario that's allowed, you would basically be allowed to apply, you'd basically plan 2 crops and you'd apply them both to the same field. What I would say to people is that if there's any double cropping scenarios that they want that aren't in the tool, to please provide some feedback on that, because that is something that we've flagged for potential future review of the available options that we've got. And it's worth flagging in the tool, towards the top of the screen, when you're using it, there is an option to get help or give your feedback. If you click on that, you can use that to provide any suggestions, and also if you had any questions about the tool, it's got the helpline contact details there as well. And then your question, what was the second question about?
It was how do you allocate NVZs?
Yeah. So in the example that we did, we set up at the beginning and said all our fields are an NVZ, and that meant that when we added each field, it didn't ask us for each field. If we had said that some of our fields were an NVZ, each time we set up a field, it would ask us that question for each of the fields. So we ask it at the beginning, because if you're a farm where all of your fields are in an NVZ or they're all not in an NVZ, we can ask it once and we don't have to ask it again. But if it's part in, part out of an NVZ, we ask it for each field.
Right, they're coming in thick and fast. So when do you plan to release the nutrient balance feature that was in
Yes,
Planet?
so that is going to be a little bit further down the line, so hopefully later next year, because what we're doing first is we are doing a review for Defra of the standard figures that we're using in that nutrient balance calculation. So we need to do that work first, which is just about to start, and then we can add that feature to the tool. So that'll be it'll be like the farm gate nutrient balance in Planet, but the hope is that as well as so Planet did that balance at a farm level, so it was NP and K onto the farm against NPK off the farm, but we're looking at doing that on a field level, on a rotation level, and on a farm level. So hopefully when that functionality is released, that should be quite useful.
And on functionality release, when will the slurry manure storage calculation become available?
So there's two elements in terms of manure storage. So there's one is a calculation to calculate existing manure storage on the farm. So basically to calculate the capacity of any existing storage stores that you've got, and that should be released later this month. The second component of that is actually calculating how much storage you need. So it's like the Planet Manures Inventory module, which collects information on the number of livestock on your farm and when they're housed, and then it calculates the total manure production. And then also, in addition to that, it calculates the minimum storage requirements under the NVZ rule, so the minimum storage requirements for slurry and poultry manure. So that we're expecting later this year.
Great, right. How do you proceed if you don't have a soil analysis?
So if you'll have noticed on that screen that you can, when it says, do you want to enter a soil analysis, you can say yes or no. We obviously hope most people have a soil analysis, but if you don't, you can select no, and it will continue to take you through the tool. And what it does, if you don't have a soil analysis, it assumes that you are at the target index values in RB209. So it will assume that you're at a P index of 2 and a potash index of 2-, and that you're at the target pH level. So you will get a recommendation based on those index values, but obviously if those target index values aren't correct for your field, it might not be accurate. So, and there's a message on the screen that just flags that if you don't enter a soil analysis, the recommendations might not be accurate for your field.
Can the tool give imperial units as well as, or is it all metric?
So at the moment, it's all metric units.
And is there the ability to put a land parcel number option in, or have you just got to put field names?
So no, at the moment, we're just collecting field name. But for Scotland, when we add Scotland, if that's a question relating to them, they will collect a couple of other field information ID options. The lipid number they'll collect.
Yeah. How do I manage fields which previously had multiple crops in them, i.e. was split?
Yeah. Okay. So if you had a field that was previously split, and you're adding it to the tool now, you would need to make a decision on which of the crops that you wanted to select as the previous crop. So if you've got a field that was previously split and you're merging it together, so it can only be managed together as one field if you have one field history for that. So you would have to select which crop to use. If you wanted to manage it with 2 different histories, you'd have to maintain it as a couple of different fields. So in Planet, we did have the ability to split and merge fields. We don't have that yet in the tool, but that is on the list of additional functionality to look at.
Right, lots of questions still coming in. We'll try and deal with a couple more. Will Defra or EA monitor the farms using this tool? Who owns the data?
Yeah, so no. And we've been asked this question a lot, and really want to reassure people that the data will not be used to check on compliance. No one else will have access to your personal data, and Defra won't share your personal data with anyone. There is a privacy notice in the tool that provides a sort of a longer, more detailed statement on that. But yeah, we've had a few people raising concerns because it's been entered onto .gov that their data might be shared. So this is to reassure people that it absolutely won't, and no one's checking up on you using the tool.
Right, when will Scotland be supported?
Scotland, yeah. So we're working on Scotland at the moment with AHDB and SAC, and we're making good progress on that. So we're hopeful that will come later this year.
Just a couple more, squeeze in a couple more. Will farms be seen at a lower risk if they use this plan by the EA?
That's an interesting question. You probably need to ask the EA that, but what I would say is this is the government funded free tool to support farmers with their nutrient management planning. And if an inspector comes and visits you on their farm and they can see that you've been using a tool that they know about to do your nutrient management planning, that should give them confidence that you've done your planning correctly. And I know from when we developed Planet and Manor, a lot of people were using Planet specifically because that gave inspectors the confidence in their nutrient management plan.
And then we'll just have one final one. What is the functionality like for advisors accessing the tool, working with multiple farms? Perhaps you can just explain a little bit how advisors can use the tool.
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked that, because I might try and defer that one to Mark. So you have one. Mark might give a more coherent answer about sharing IDs.
So the tool uses Defra customer identity, and when you go through the login process, you can log in, access the tool as an organisation, and once doing so, you can then grant users access to your organisation itself. So as an advisor, you could be granted multiple organisations, and then when you go to log into the tool, you'll be greeted with a page which then lists all those out, and you can select who it is that you'd like to work on behalf of. And then when you click through into that organisation, you'll see their farms present. So that's how it works for advisors using the tool moving forward.
That's great. I'll just ask one more question. Maybe Mark, you can answer this one as well. It says, what's the maximum number of fields and activity the tool can support whilst staying stable? How much can it cope with?
That's a good question. And at the moment, there isn't a maximum. We've tried to test it to its limits as much as we possibly can. So please do let us know if you have any problems when you're going through the tool using our help desk email account. But, no, there isn't a limit, and so hopefully everything will work okay.
Okay. Right, with just 1 minute to go or so, I'll just draw it to a close and just thank everyone for joining. Thanks to Lizzie and Izzy for taking us through the tool, and thank you for all your questions. Lots of great questions, and I hope you found it useful. Just to remind you, there's a link in the chat for you to be able to fill in a form for your basis points. And we'll also be adding a link, I think it's there already, to the live tool so that you can access it to and have a bit of a play with it. We will be circulating a feedback form in the next couple of days. It'd be great if you could give us some feedback. We are continuing to develop, as you can see, the tool with different future releases planned. to add additional functionality. So any feedback is really helpful. And just to say that this has been recorded and will be made available on the ADAS YouTube channel if you want to go back into it and remind yourself or you missed something. It will be there for you to have a look at. And I think that's all I was supposed to say. So thank you very much for joining, and have fun with the tool.
Thanks, everyone.